Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Journey Through the Innerverse.
Hello.
Alexis and I are sharing another archive chat. But before we get into the details of what you can expect in this episode, we just want to check in with the energy, briefly discuss the cosmic climate, hoping everyone's well. And I'm going to start with Alexis. Alexis, how are you? How are you doing right now?
So I'm not doing so hot. As you know, Urania, I have been dealing with the flu now for the last several days. And coincidentally, it began the day that Mercury went into retrograde.
Yeah, that is pretty ironic and it makes you want to reflect and contemplate. And I have something to share on that for the both of us because I am currently laying on my bed here in my office because I pulled my back just hours ago as I was lifting an ottoman. I mean, it didn't have an extra cushion. It was small. It wasn't anything like crazy, and it was a wild experience because it was like something you would see in a movie or a TV show where there's like a little lady lifting something and they're just like, "Ah, my back." Like, it was literally the whole expression. And I was really scared that I was not going to be able to stand up. I was, but it was really hard for me to like sit down or lay down. And now I'm laying down and I'm probably not going to get up for a while. So here we are. And as Alexis said, Mercury retrograde Monday, which was what, November 25th. We are recording this on November 28th. And my little theory of our Mercury retrograde introduction, Alexis, is that I mean, it's just as simple as maybe we need to slow it down a little bit more, relax, and just take it easy, be well, all of those things.
I agree with you. I think that's a good I think it's a good theory and holds up. I know you with just alone being a mom, it
Yeah.
keeps your going, keeps you going.
Yeah.
And then everything on top of that, and myself, I load myself up with tons of different things, and it just we just got to make
Yeah.
space for rest,
Just gotta slow it down. Yeah. I
especially
mean,
going into like the season for hibernation.
absolutely. And I was only laying down for an hour. I told myself, no, I'm gonna give myself like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I was so restless. Like it just I it was obvious that I really can't sit still unless I'm doing it in a very intentional spiritual way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that took a lot of practice, but to just sit down and rest, without any intention but to rest, that's really hard for me. So I think that's a major lesson here for this Mercury retrograde, or at least I'm going to like take that into account.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to stay still. It's really hard to just lay down and stay still. Maybe including something fidgety while you lay
Yeah.
down, like
Yeah.
something that you can just occupy your hands with to get yourself to like come down. But I have a similar issue. I need to be doing like a bajillion different things while I'm laying down. Otherwise, I'm just restless.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of laying down, this is an interesting chat that we're sharing with you all. This is a hot and juicy one. It was a highly anticipated topic of my own. Sex and dreams is what you will hear us discuss in this archived episode. This is part one of two conversations we had around this topic.
Our live chat took place on July 3rd of 2024. Not only do we share our personal dream experiences regarding sex, we also discuss Carl Jung's interesting perspectives on sexual desires and archetypes and how it can manifest in our dreams. There's so much to learn and contemplate, and this is one of our listeners' favorite chats. You'll definitely enjoy it. And I have to say, um, I I don't want to say I always have sex and dreams because I definitely don't always have sex and dreams, but the topic of sex in my dreams is frequent. I mean, even like waking up this morning, I was having sex in my dream. And it was weird and embarrassing. And I felt like I was like 14, like never having sex before. And it's hilarious. So check out the episode and see how this, relates to you and your dream space and share the embarrassment.
All right, we are live. Hello, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Alexis. Oh my goodness. I am so excited about this topic. It's not even funny.
I am too. I'm a little wary just because it's oh it's just an like it's like a very personal
It's
topic. Dreams are
sensitive.
in
Yeah.
general are personal and sensitive, but then to add like the sex aspect to it, it brings it to like a whole different thing. But I'm
Yeah.
really excited nonetheless.
So I guess the first place to start is to essentially define sex, because I guess with that basic definition of what sex is will help us to, navigate how that will show up in dreams and like what that means. And if, this certain experience or interaction with someone or something or yourself, is that actually sex in the dream? So how would you, I'm going to put you on the spot, Alexis, how would you define sex if you could, if it's clear, to define
I mean, I
words?
feel like it's a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all at once, or only one of those at a time experience. Well, including physical, because in my head, right, it's mostly physical, but an experience where two people get intimate. Um, I don't really have any external definitions outside
Mhm.
of two two or more, I should say, two or more having an intimate experience with each other. But yeah, I don't want to like exclude anyone from that.
Right. Yeah.
But
No,
yeah.
I mean, defining sex, I guess it was for me too. I was thinking about this last night and then thinking about it again today. And it was kind of difficult for me to define it as well. I know Jace, who is usually participates and watches live with us too, he defined it as the release of pleasure, I believe, if I'm getting that right. So there's like the act, like this act or coming together was like sex results in the release of pleasure. And I'm sure he didn't necessarily mean that it has to be like you have to climax every time, but just maybe whatever tension, whatever, is there, like there's some sort of pleasurable release, whether it's the
Mhm.
experience. And we could also debate on that too, because there are acts of sex when it's not pleasurable, but maybe it's pleasurable for at least one person is feeling some sort of pleasure and release. So that's kind of a very
Yeah.
sensitive and touchy way to look at that. But
Exactly.
one of the things that I do that I really enjoyed, and I shared this with Alexis, and wow, I need to ground myself because I cannot speak right now. All right, so see, this subject is making me, stumble over my words. Okay.
It's fine
So,
though because
right.
we already knew what was gonna happen.
Yeah,
We warned
exactly.
y'all.
And I gave you guys a heads up, a lot of laughter, a lot of, but I love this topic. And so what I was going to say is that there is a podcast called This Jungian Life that I love. And I've been sharing episodes with Alexis that sometimes relate to the podcast or not, or, our chats or not. And I found one that they had on sex. And the title of their podcast is called This Jungian Life. And the episode is called Sex and Its Undeniable Power to Fascinate. And so if you want to check that out, it is in the link to it. The Spotify link is going to be in the description of our video chat here. But they gave a really good breakdown of sex from the psychological point of view. And I like that they pointed out a few points of what sex can be considered. So of course, there's the act of pleasure and enjoyment. Also, sex is the act of, they say, procreation. So that was one of the things. And also an expression of love, and ultimately a coming together in union, with one or more, to also bring yourself closer to divine, right? Or bring yourself closer to that wholeness. So when coming together in the sexual act, that will in some ways bring you closer to feeling whole, right? And that
Oh
really
yeah.
you can feel that, or you can kind of get a conceptual understanding of that when you take into account when you're not having sex, or when you're not in a relationship where there's that longing for the other, or to come into that union or intimacy with someone in order to find that whole or feel that wholeness or be in that energy. And in a sense, it's like you are coming into wholeness with divine nature within yourself too. Like that longing for someone else is like, it's like you're missing this aspect of yourself, right? So it's almost like
Yes.
longing for yourself, right? So
Yes.
those are the ways in which we could define sex. And yeah, I feel like it's all of that, right? Like all of those and probably more. Like
Yeah.
sometimes the act of sex, it's like hard to put into words of like what that is. And you and I both experienced that, trying to, define that for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to um what you just said about, you feel that wholeness when you have sex, so you might be seeking out sex to find that wholeness in yourself. And it may not be as healthy and satisfying for you physically because
Mm-hmm.
you're not finding yourself. You're looking for it in someone else, like you would emotionally and mentally and stuff like that. And I feel like that's kind of where an aspect of sex addiction can come in as well. And they talked a little bit about that on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and how it's not really recognized as much as it should be. But it
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense, because if you feel empty, you feel lacking, and you seek out something pleasurable that in the moment makes you feel more whole, you're going to try to seek that out more and more frequently. So I just wanted to touch upon that because I thought that was an interesting aspect.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm also thinking about how just that type of pleasure, that coming into union, you can feel that in so many ways aside from, the act of having sex. And I
Yes,
think that's very powerful. And I think this is a good way to start the conversation, because we're going to talk about sex and dreams. And so we probably want to define specifically what that might be for the dream
absolutely.
space. And so what I liked in the podcast too is that they gave three, I guess you could say, categories, or three kind of aspects of sex, or maybe just the nature of sex, right? And so the three main points or categories, I guess you could say, is that they first started with sex. So they said sex essentially is a powerful physical tension that is released in pleasure and euphoria. And they were also equating these different points to God, so to speak, or mythological character. So they said that sex is the realm of Pan. So
Yep.
sexuality makes us earthy, like that primal instinct and desire is what we experience here on earth. And it's very, like, the way in which we experience it here on earth is very unique, and that's a very primal instinct. And so I think that will be interesting to dive into that in dreams, because it's like, okay, if this is like an earthly experience, or sexuality and sex in itself is what makes us earthy, how does that show up in dreams? And is that, so we'll get into that. Did you want to add anything to the sex category
No,
or
I
point?
thought I think that you're definitely, I mean, I did really enjoy the aspect of bringing in the god elements, like the different gods elements. And I was even curious, like, you being an astrologer, and I don't know if this comes up,
Mm-hmm.
but do you find that sex correlates more, or more significantly, with people who have stronger earth signs within their chart? That kind of just like
Mm,
popped up in my head, because I'm thinking like it's such an earthly thing, and
that's a good
I'm just
question.
curious.
The first earth sign, the first earth energy that came to my mind is Taurus. Like I feel if any sign is the most sensual and sexual and just like primal, it's definitely Taurus. And I feel Taurus is just like there's a slow moving energy, and it's like about the safety and personal security and comfort. Of course, we're talking about the pure essence, or like that, like pure, the core of the sign, right? And I feel that with Taurus. But it's interesting because you can get that sense too, that very strong desire with other signs as well. Like I would say, as far as water signs, I would definitely point to Scorpio. As Scorpio, it's
Absolutely.
like
Yep.
that passion, that desire. And again, it's like this slow moving energy that's very, like I said, passionate and driven and can go deep, right? And with the air signs, honestly, I don't like it's the air signs don't give me that vibe, none of them. And I got Aquarius, so I can say. And when it comes to fire, I mean, I would say Leo out of all the three. And what it is, it's that fixed passion. The only reason why I didn't point to like Aquarius is because of that detachment, right? And I
Yep.
feel with Aquarius, because with Pisces also, and like now I'm jumping into another water sign, but Pisces, it's like it wants to merge and have that union, and it already feels that, but I feel like it's like there's not enough of like an embodied presence within Pisces, because it is literally that ethereal water. So it's like, it's pretty much air in itself, like watery
Yeah.
air, so to speak. And so there's not like the body, right? It's kind of lacking in that sustenance, or I'm probably not substance, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. But I would say, out of all the signs, who I personally, my own personal perspective, also my own experience, Taurus, it's just like, wow, all right. And so yeah, that was a fun question. Thanks for asking that.
Well, the reason I brought that up is because I'm a double air, Libra Aquarius, and a water, and I don't have a whole lot of sexual energy. Like, I really don't. It's not something that
Yeah.
I'm super connected with, and that's okay. Like, I don't have any issues with that. But it's interesting to see the dynamic of
Mm-hmm.
astrology and sex and how it kind of correlates. And you
Yeah.
even saying that, like, you don't get that from any of the air signs, just kind
Yeah.
of like makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because okay, so what I feel with Scorpios, what I've noticed from many Scorpios that I've talked to, and I feel like I've heard other astrologers say this, but I might be wrong. But basically, I feel like with Scorpios, because they're very stereotyped for being very, very sexual. And there's something, and I think it's because of the raw passion, and they have this intensity about them that really people, and it's the mysterious nature of Scorpio, that people are really like really desire them, and they hone in on them at times, right? But I think with Scorpio individuals, there's tends to be something with sex, like either it's like it's a lot of it, and they're either in it or they're not, right? And there's an ability to be very disciplined with that because it is like a sacred act, right? And I feel that Scorpio, especially depending on, the specific placements, there's kind of like a reverence with sexuality. And yeah, so I was going to go somewhere else with that. Oh yeah, for me personally, I think that I tend to really, like, I as a youth, as a younger person, I was definitely very sexual, like from a young person. And I will point to my Mars in Pisces and Venus in Pisces. They're conjoined, so and in the house of sexuality and all of that stuff. And as I've gotten older, through life lessons and just like learning more about true desire, I've been able to be on the other side of that, where I'm in a space now where I'll be totally transparent. Like, I haven't had sex in like a year, and I'm okay with that because I am very picky, very discerning. And like I said, through experience, like, and through that Scorpio essence that I point to within myself, I am very like, I hold that act sacred. And
Yes.
that'll bring us
You're
into the
guarded.
other
You're
three.
guarded
Yeah,
with
yeah,
it. Yeah.
but in a good way. I'm not like, I definitely, it's not like no sex. It's more so just like I'm having sex with myself. And
Yeah. No,
like
I
when the
completely
time
understand.
comes, it's like I want it to, yeah, I'm willing to wait for, something that is divine. So there's that. So that was a very a long tangent, but it was a really, really good question.
Thank
And
you.
so, going into the other 2 points, so the next one would be love. And forgive me, I don't know, I don't remember the god that they mentioned for love. I don't know. Did you? Because
I
it was
can't.
someone that wasn't. I think it started with
Yeah.
an A, but it was something very like.
Maybe. Oh, was it Aphrodite?
No, it wasn't. I feel like it was like a masculine god, or maybe I don't think it was male or female. I think it was like some sort of cosmic, more of like a cosmic god or
I
something
think so.
within
I'm
like
trying to
wholeness.
remember.
Yeah, it starts with an
They
A.
talked about a
So
few of them.
they did. So you all have to listen to the episode to hear what who the love god is. But basically, when they pointed to love, they did point to it being the tension and the longing and the longingness of completion, right? Of being one with the divine. So coming into that aspect of wholeness. And so when we are in that space of love, it's like we're searching for the other, right? And that just like supreme divine connection that makes us feel whole, right? So when we're in a physical engagement with someone in the act of sex, that's how you deepen that, I guess you could say, that sexual act is that you are coming into union with essentially someone else, and you're connecting to what that means to be in union and to be connected with the divine, which is like that ultimate desire. I feel like
Yeah.
the underlying desire. So any thoughts on that you want to?
I really like that. I feel like I resonate really strongly with that. The love aspect. I think that's where it comes in. Like, you know, sex isn't something that I really think about too often, but when I do, it's purely for love, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
I like that aspect. I like the coming together and feeling whole and having that really intimate emotional experience. And like, I've never been one of those people that were seeking out just pure pleasure.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
like, and that's just me, that's just
Mm-hmm.
me. It's not bad if you do that, but it's just nothing. I never really did that, felt that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's all I have for that one.
Yeah. And I feel when, like, as a youth, and I think, of course, just bringing back in the astrology, I feel that aspect of Pisces is like, I feel Pisces already connects to the love because, and just, I mean, it doesn't have to be, your sign, but just thinking about the archetype of Pisces where, it is that ultimate merging with the divine, and they can really find love in all things. I feel that it kind of jumps to that love space, that love realm, just instinctually, in that regard. And so just personally for me, it's been hard to, ever since I was a young person, to separate love from sex. And I
Yep.
feel like as I'll point to the next one, it's like the integration of all three is like what I was seeking and feeling like I was connecting with whenever I did, have sex essentially. And so
Yeah,
it's really interesting that, when you're looking at these different categories of sex or sexuality, you see how they can all come into union and how they all serve their own purpose.
absolutely.
So, yeah, so the next point or the next category here within sexuality is eros. So, eros is said to there's a drive for companionship that leads to joy. So, that feeling of joy is what the eros energy is pointing to, right? And so they mentioned that this can be found in friends, right? And so that really makes sense to me because I feel when you get to a certain point on your sexual journey, you will come to a space, especially when you abstain from physical sex, you then are kind of almost forced to seek, that pleasure, or in this case joy, from other things. And you can realize, if you're in a space to do so, you'll realize that you can feel that kind of pleasure that you were thinking was just gonna come from sex. You can receive that in other ways.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that definitely makes sense to me. That companionship that leads to joy is so important, and people really, I feel like that's something that most everyone longs for, even if they don't think about it. Like it's an important aspect of coming together.
Yeah. And so it's going to be really interesting to kind of look at these 3 points, these 3 categories of sexuality, and to see how that shows up in dreams, right? And how, are we actually having sex in dreams? How do we experience sex in dreams? And then what does it mean when we experience these interactions? And yeah, so I guess we can just get right into it, unless there's something
Yeah,
else you want to add here. Oh, I do want to add that Freud, so they did mention Freud's theory and Jung's theory, and those are kind of the go-tos when we're considering dreams and, psychology. And so Freud, as most of us know, his main theory is that sexual desire is the primary instinct. It is like the, you know, force, right? The driving force, the motivator for everything that we do. And I don't know,
obviously
Lexus, you're
that's not
making,
something
yeah.
that I was just gonna say that I don't think that I personally don't
No.
what's the word? I don't relate to that specific one. And I think we talked about this before. I feel like Freud didn't do enough like work on working through his traumas, and it was really showing up in his studies. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, it was wild. So, yeah. But I want to point that out. And then Jung's theory is a little bit more nuanced. And so he definitely, agreed to a certain degree that, sex is primal and it's important. However, he took it a bit deeper in his theory, and it was very, it was more spiritual, and there's just so many layers to it, in reference to how sex or sexual desire or desire within itself, motivates us or influences our actions and the way we perceive and live our lives and engage with others. So I wanted to, point
yeah,
those two
it's
theories out.
yeah, I agree, and it's kind of interesting to look at the dynamic because Jung was taught by Freud, right? That was the dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
Jung
then they
was
were
Freud's
pretty,
student.
I don't know if he was actually his student. I know they were working together at the same time, like not working together, but they were doing their own work at the same time, and they were
Right.
engaging as like peers. I think
Yes.
Freud was a bit of Jung's senior. If anyone's watching, and they know more so about this, what we're talking about, definitely share it in the chat, or, share it in the comments later if you're watching the replay. But I'm pretty sure that they were more so peers, and this was their dividing point
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yes.
That kind of was like, oh, okay, we're going in different directions,
Yeah,
which,
and
yeah,
it's a really good example of like looking at someone who is studying with preconceived judgments and kind of his
yeah,
more black and white perspective, whereas Jung's perspective was much more broad and more grayscale, and kind of took a more balanced approach to it. And even like learning about, we had talked about this off camera, but learning about Jung and hearing how he had been essayed as a child and thinking it was Freud, but it was
right.
actually Jung. But it's interesting how, like, Freud is the one who went in that direction of it being very like the all all encompassing force of everything is sex. And that is so, it feels so surface level, and so it feels wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do believe that it's just Freud didn't work through a certain aspect of his traumas and it was projected in his studies,
Yeah.
whereas Jung was just a little more balanced.
Yeah, and it
And
felt
it's
like
good to
very
go
like
into the,
restricted.
yes, it's really good to go into studying these people and hearing their points of view with this understanding, because when you're studying things, it's really not super wise to just follow one person and everything they
Mm-hmm.
say is correct and everything they say is the way to go, because everything is so diverse and personal and individual. So looking at Freud and Jung and acknowledging both of their benefits to the field and study of dreaming, despite feeling like Freud's is so I don't want to say off-putting, but there's just it feels
There's an
heavier.
energy about it. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it feels like a heavier, like I feel like I'm it just feels like it's more personal to him rather than understanding a broader perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because with Freud's work, and I took in high school AP psychology because I wanted to just for some dreams attracted me. I mean, I feel like dreams attract most people. And it's interesting because you start with Freud almost, and then it's like it gets to a certain point, and you're like, all right, so now we're gonna because it's like we're gonna transition to this where it's more expansive because I felt like it was getting narrower and narrower, like it was really constricted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, so it's really interesting how we get both of these theories and these perspectives on just our own psyche, and also with the nature of sex, where with Jung's a lot of his theory focused on the anima and animus, which is like the feminine and the masculine, right? And like the archetypes too that encompass all of that, and it's very expansive and it goes very deep, so there's so many layers to it, and like sexuality definitely plays a very important role, but it's not like everything, the all the yeah, like it's not the one and only thing. And so that was something to really just kind of contemplate a bit when considering what sex is and the role it plays within our waking life and how that might show up in dreams. And so as far as like the dream realm, so I do want to say hi to Jim. Jim was
Hey,
apologizing for
Jim.
being late, but it says happy to see you guys. Hi Jim, thanks for being here. Um, so with these three main points or three main categories of sexuality, which one do you feel that there's one that's more definitive of sex and dreams, or do you feel there's a little bit of everything?
I
Like,
feel
I
like
mean, what are
there's a
your
little
thoughts
bit
on
of
this?
everything and more. And the reason I say more is because I don't always take like I don't take sex and dreams as literally. A lot of the times, like I feel like when I have sex in dreams, sometimes it's for pleasure, but most of the times there's an underlying message to like why it's happening, you know? Um, how I'm treating people can kind of come back. Like if I feel like for example, I had a dream a while ago that um I had essayed somebody,
Mm,
and that to me was a reflection of me putting too much attention and kind of like bombarding them with my attention and making them feel metaphorically um like I don't know, it was more like a metaphorical. I'm trying to be careful with the words that I use because I know
mm-hmm.
that YouTube can be weird.
Yeah.
um but it was a reflection of me feeling like I was overwhelming them,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it in the dream it that's how it came out.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a broad I have a broad understanding of what different sexual dreams would be. I think the physical pleasure is definitely one, especially in lucid dreams, that a lot of people encounter. um it's weird too because sometimes within my dreams it's like a cut scene, like I'll go to have sex and then the sex is over, but I wasn't actually experiencing the in between of starting and ending.
Yeah. It was like the
Like,
initiation and then the end.
and then it being completely over, which I find interesting as well because I didn't even stick around for like the pleasurable aspect. It was just the idea
It
of it.
happened. Yeah. Which is interesting, like, and this is something that I came across too when researching the act of sex and dreams. And what I've come across, there isn't actually a lot of research, so to speak. There's, of course, you get your typical what's this mean and the interpretation. And so I kind of dove into that, and a lot of it pointed to, or I wouldn't say a lot of it pointed to, but there was pointing to one, a desire or some sort of guidance or a heads up to this is a point where you want to deepen a connection with yourself or deepen your spirituality, or of course there's the other end of the spectrum where it's like, well, maybe you are repressing your sexual energy or your
Yep.
creative energy, your life force energy, so there's a calling to put more focus and attention into that. And I feel with all of those, yes, and it's all of the things, right? And it really comes down to your own individual dreams specifically, and like what that means for you and how that shows up for you. And so, as I've been actually paying a lot more attention to dream work, it's been a time where I actually haven't been having sex. And so I don't know if this is specifically 100% true, but since I haven't been having physical sex, I have been having a lot of sexual encounters in my dream. And I was joking around with a friend the other day because, like, even in the dream I shared last week where I had the lucid dream and I was being pursued by someone, and I tend to always like have sex in my dreams. Even when I was having sex, I would, if I'm lucid dreaming, I'm having sex or, some sort of engagement in that way. And this was the first time in a lucid dream that I wasn't focused on that at all. And it was interesting because someone, it wasn't even a person that I knew, because usually they're people that I know. Someone showed up like throughout the dream here and there, like they would just pop in, and they were really trying to seduce me into having a sexual engagement. And then finally, by the end of the dream, I was like, all right, I don't really have anything to do. I know this dream is going to collapse soon. I'm going to wake up or something. And so, I was trying to give into it. But yeah, and so it's really interesting because for me, it's like, yes, there's a strong desire to have the physical engagement. It's definitely that engagement is fulfilled in other ways, say in waking life with the eros, right? And the love aspect where it's like, I am like, since I haven't been having sex, like I have like physical sex, I have been deepening my relationships with so many people in my life on a very like spiritual level. I've deepened in my relationship with my own spirituality and my practice. So yeah, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I do, as far as my answer, I feel that sex in dreams is it can be all three of those elements, because in my last lucid dream, seeing those two ladies who I guess were my spirit guides or the dream creators, like that was love and eros. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm here with them. It felt like that coming into wholeness or being one with the divine, and also of course that eros energy.
It's almost like you seek it in your dream because you're seeking that in yourself, but then yourself presented itself in a completely different way that was more, you know, pointed and it's almost like you don't need this aspect to have this aspect. Um or you're just coming more into tune with it. I find that so very interesting. And I also wanted to add that these can also be reflections of past experiences,
Mm-hmm.
especially if there are like memories that are suppressed. Things can come up in your dream that you haven't dealt with, literally, especially like, sex is a very, very personal experience, and a lot of people haven't had the best experiences around sex. So
Yeah.
it can come up in these ways, and it can come up in interesting ways too. Like, um, I had experiences with someone as a boss, and the way that they treated me in person was really shitty and inconsiderate of how I felt. And I had had a dream after I'd left that. I'd had a dream that this person was trying to essay me and was just kind of like naked and exposing themselves to me. And I kind of
Mm.
was like, I don't really want to, like, I was lucid. I was like, I don't really want anything to do with this. It's awkward, it's weird, it's uncomfortable. And so instead of pursuing the sex aspect, this person I had worked under years ago started kind of like unleashing his emotional traumas onto me in the dream rather than sexual. And it was almost like it was a reflection
Interesting.
of the lack of boundaries
Yeah.
that were instilled within that workplace, and it just came through as this sexual energy, especially because there was uncomfortable sexual energy coming off of that person, even if it wasn't direct. you know there's
Mm-hmm.
a the way that people talk, or whatever, or aura they're putting off. Sometimes it can feel like intense sexual energy, and then a toxic personality on top of that. It can have an odd effect and intertwine itself in your unconscious. Like there's so many different aspects to the way that sex shows up in your dreams, and it is one of the reasons why it's so fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. Just hearing you say that, it brought to memory a dream that I definitely conveniently blocked out. It was disgusting. And I'm not going to get into details, but I'll just share just the, again, with YouTube, it's, I don't know like what I can say, what I can't say, but nonetheless, this was a very disturbing dream. So I have a childhood friend where she's, older, but we were in high school together, and um her son had in real life got killed, or it was shot and then died, days later. And I have like, when people close to me lose loved ones, they come to me, and like sometimes they'll come to me in dreams. And so he came to me in a dream, and mind you, he was well, I guess he was like 17 or something like that, but um he was trying to have a sexual engagement with me, and it just like really freaked me out. Like I already get freaked out when people that have passed on come to me in dreams. And that wasn't at a point too. This was like 2 years ago. So I wasn't doing dream work or anything. So it was like, I definitely wasn't like trying to go deep with that. And yeah, and it was just like, it was so weird. And it was like, that was the only time that type of dream happened. But he like visited me in dreams off like a few times until basically I talked to her and like gave her a message from him, basically. But it's really interesting because I'm like, what was, I don't know if it was like my psyche was trying to give me, like, if that was like a nightmare to like, connect with her or whatever, or I have no idea. But like, when I'm sitting here thinking about this topic, I'm thinking about just my natural theme of, oh, I'm having a lucid dream. This is what's going to happen. Um, and I just thought about that and I'm like, I have no idea how to interpret that. And that was really uncomfortable. And, I can go maybe off camera, you know, I could share with you more, but like, because now I'm like, I can kind of see where that was going on a personal message for me, but that was like a very distorted, disgusting way to,
It does
present that.
that. They do that. Like I have had some very uncomfortable dreams, and I just want to say real quick, I'm sorry if how I went about talking about that triggered any kind of uncomfortable feelings. That's not what that's
Oh
not my
yeah, I
intention.
know.
And
I appreciate
so
it.
I'm sorry if that happened. I don't want to invoke any bad experiences.
Yeah.
And just listening to that, I can empathize with how uncomfortable that type of dream could be. And even just thinking about it, like you could have had two completely different traumas coming up in your life and fusing together within your dream too. Like you could be on one hand, because if somebody close to me loses someone close to them, I hurt
Mm-hmm.
for them. I hurt for myself because most of the time I know that person. And even
Yep.
if I'm not super close to that person, it is a deep cut.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody who you love, or somebody who loves someone who you're close to, their loved ones pass, there's always a heaviness that lingers with you. I have this with people who I don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
But you could have been working through your own traumas, fears around death, fears around, this happening, whether it be the act of being shot, the act of losing a child, the act of, just losing someone
Mm-hmm.
close to you, and then some other traumas bubbling to the
Mm-hmm.
surface and kind of just integrating themselves together.
Mm-hmm.
um you know I have a wide spectrum of belief and theories when it comes to dreams, so it's not totally outlandish for me to think that your brain is taking really difficult things and juxtaposing it in its own little horror story.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an intense thing to experience, and I definitely
Yeah.
have, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of sex dreams. I could probably count on my hands how many sex dreams I've had.
Mm-hmm.
But they've all had an impact in different ways. The more heavier ones I remember one from when I was in high school, or like right after high school, where I had been sexually involved with someone, and I had a dream about, them doing things to me, and it was more like I was lucid in the dream, but it was very anxiety driven, very like
Mm-hmm.
just, and that's not something that I, thought was going to happen, but there was uncomfortable sexual activity that had happened that
Mm-hmm.
was mirroring that into my dream. And then the trauma of then disconnecting with the person completely, it has your psyche is so interesting, and it has its own ways of protecting you, but then it also has its own way of trying to help you deal with the things that you've been through.
Yeah.
And if you're also using your free will to ignore the things that you need to work through, it's just gonna come up in such
Yeah.
uncomfortable ways. But on the same like note, I have sexual dreams where they are the funniest experiences. I don't understand it. There's no pleasure in it. There's no like it's such an odd experience where like I had this one sex dream, and it was so, like, I was lucid. It was so funny. I completely ignored the aspect of the dream, but I had someone had come to me. Now, I was in my childhood tree house, which I had never owned. Like, I've never had a childhood tree house, but in my
Mm.
dream, I was in my childhood tree house. I cannot explain it. If anybody watching or yourself have ever saw House of Haunted Hill, or oh,
Silent Hill? No.
no, it's a show on Netflix.
Oh,
Hill House.
I haven't seen
Hill
it.
House. So there's a room in the house that doesn't technically, like, you can't get into, but you can get into, but it changes the way you view it. So, like, in this
Mm,
show,
interesting.
there is a treehouse that this kid remembers growing up in, but the treehouse never existed. It was this room
Mm.
that nobody could get into, and the room changed for each person. So it
Oh,
was
that's
kind of
cool.
like that energy where, like, in the dream, it was definitely a childhood experience, but one I had never had. And this person had come up to my treehouse and was, like, interested in sex, and I was interested in sex too. And, like, in my lucid dream, I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. I bet you've never had sex with a P-bird girl, da 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 da, because that's what they call the town that I'm from. The sex happened even though it didn't happen. So, like, I initiated it, and then it was immediately the end. So I felt no pleasure. And then I
Wow.
laughed about how, like, see how you just had sex with a puber girl, and, like, just, like, gloating about that, being very prideful. Like, I'm not proud of my zip code, but it was just so funny in the dream, and it's something that I would never do. And it just, and then the rest of the dream, I just looked outside of a window into, like, this icy wintry escape. But it's there's no explanation for that for me. Like, it was just a stupid silly thing that happened, and that's it. No underlying thing. I didn't even get to experience the sex part. It was just
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, is like in dreams. I was curious, and this is like we talked after our last episode when knew that this was going to be a topic about we talked about do you actually feel the sex in the dreams? And when I thought about it, I was like, I actually don't recall feeling like the physical act. Like for me, it was primarily the feeling. And so my theme of having sex was in my dreams, which I wouldn't say happened often. I would say within the past year, probably more often than not. And but in my lucid dreams, like whenever I found myself lucid until I started doing dream work, I was like, oh yeah, okay, who's coming in right now? Right. And it could be just like a makeout session. It wasn't always like, okay, we're gonna have sex. And 9 times out of 10, we didn't get to the sex part. And actually, like when I think about it too, I feel that I have always not had physical sex, because even recently, in the recent times where I have decided to have sex while doing dream work, I wasn't able to actually engage, like have the act, right? It was almost like a big tease. And so that's really interesting to think about. But I know in other dreams where I haven't been lucid, it's like I remember the very end of the dream and I wake up and either I'm about to climax in real life or I actually do climax. So it's something interesting there. So when I'm not conscious, like fully conscious, I do kind of reach that climax, but in when I'm lucid, I don't, like the dream collapses. Like it's like, no, we're not this is not what we're here for.
It's so funny you mentioned the feelings, because I generally don't, like, I didn't feel like my sex dreams. I generally don't feel like the pleasure aspect, or it skips, or I'm just like, but I do have, like, the craziest dream I ever had involved sex, and it was a dream where, like, I had drank with my husband the night before, like blackout drunk,
Mm-hmm.
and
In
I
waking
woke
life,
up
right?
with I woke up with yeah, in real life, and I woke up with a hangover in somebody else's bed.
Like in the dream though.
Yeah, it was
Like in
but
the
it
dream. So you went to bed, blackout, in waking life, and then in your dream, you woke up in your dream, but in someone else's bed hungover.
with
So
a
I'm just make sure
hangover.
that's clear. I've heard this dream before,
Yes,
but I
yeah,
want to make
yeah,
sure
yeah. No,
everyone
you're
gets that.
exactly right. So I woke up in someone else's bed, hungover, dizzy. I was like looking around the room. It was kind of like a little woozy, and there were kids' toys in the room. And I looked over to the left of me, and there's this man curled up next to me, and then I look over and his wife is sitting up with a cup of coffee, and some kids run in the room, and they're like talking to the mom, and the mom's like, your father's gonna go make breakfast for you, and she wakes him up, and he gets up all groggy and brings the kids out to the room, like to the kitchen, and gets some breakfast and closes the door behind him. And then his wife starts making out with him. Now, mind you, before we even got to this point, I wake up and I'm like, where am I? Like, ooh, and they're like, you're in this country. And I'm like, I'm in what country? I don't have a
Yeah, you weren't
passport.
even in America. Yeah, that
No.
was a
And they
wild
were like,
dream. I remember that. That
so
was
they're like,
crazy.
you're in this country. I had like went to grab my head and I had a headache, but when I went to touch my face right here, it like stung when I touched it. And it turns out I forced them to take me to get my like a dermal right here the night before.
Hmm.
So like in the middle of the night, I'm in another country, forcing these random people to take me to get a piercing. I wake up, I have this like painful piercing, I have a headache, I'm vertigo, I don't know where I am. It smells completely different. The sheets are different, the bed's bigger, there's toys everywhere. I'm like, what the fuck? So she tells me like what happened and what I was doing the night before, and then like she starts making out with me, and I like kind of pull away for a second because I'm like, I am shook. I am flabbergasted. I am like, what is going on? So she looks at me and she's like, isn't this what you wanted? And I'm like, sure, like, yeah. And then we have sex, and it's like the most intense, pleasurable, like, sex I had from like it was incredible. And then her husband comes back in, and she leaves the room and closes the door. And then he has sex with me. And then he
Damn, it's
leaves.
getting it.
So I'm in the bedroom by myself, and I'm like, what just happened? I, I'm so like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't think I was dreaming in that first part. Like
Right.
was I felt like I was in a different universe.
Yeah, like
Completely
you,
different
I
universe.
remember that you were saying that you felt that you astral traveled in that
Yeah,
dream.
it was insane. And then like I got up and I was like panicking and kind of taking in everything, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna get home. And George had like left me like 30,000 messages on my phone because he didn't know where I was. And then I was like, I had to call him back. I told him who I had sex with, both of them, and then just like I waited on the porch and they brought me out coffee, and this wasn't I was it was like an entire day.
I really feel like definitely now, but even when you told me this when it happened, like when you had the dream, I was like, no, you absolutely, I feel you astral traveled. And
I was in a
one of the things I
universe.
like that Jace mentions is that when you astral travel, like you can be like you can be lucid, but he was saying the difference between like in a dream when you're lucid and astral traveling when you're lucid is that like you can't really like change the flow of what's going on. Like you can make your own decisions and your own sovereignty, like from my understanding what he's saying, but like you can't really, you can try to make commands and demands of the dream, but it's like no. You're going
And
along
I
with the flow
felt
until you pop out.
it's interesting because I felt when it went back, right? So it was like an astral travel for like half the dream. And then it went back to just a lucid dream. Like
Yeah.
it was so interesting. But in that dream, I had now someone who doesn't really dream about sex, I had sex with two people. Mind you, the wife was so much better than the husband. Like
Yeah,
I'm
of
just gonna
course.
throw that out there. Like
Of
it was
course.
way better. And I was genuinely like scared. Like I was like, I'm in a different place. I'm not in the same country. I have no passport. I cheated on my husband with another couple. How am I going to explain this to him? I explained it to him, and he was just like, okay, well, I guess that's something we're going to have to talk about deeper when you get home. And I was like, how am I
Right.
going to get home? Like,
Right.
it was such an interesting experience. But that's an example of an experience where I felt the physical aspects of it.
Oh, so you
Like,
did? Okay.
I felt the physical aspects of having sex, but I don't usually.
Yeah. Yeah, so that brings us to an interesting. I want to go over the poll since we're here at like
Yes.
almost an hour. I do want to point out Jim's comment. Jim says, "I want to dream like Lex's minus the husband." Then he also said that Lex, perceptive and sensitive, you're a very kind person, obviously affirming my faith in humanity. I think that's like pointing to what you shared with me, or, just supporting that you didn't mean to make me feel that way. And I love you so much, Lex. Like, I know you didn't mean that. I think that was meant to happen. So,
I
know
just,
how we
yeah, it's
roll.
one of those things where we've talked about it, right? It's very sensitive, and
Yeah.
I just, it's touchy. But thank you, Jim. I
Touchy,
appreciate
touchy.
that very much.
Okay, so on to the poll. So in my Instagram story, since I knew this was going to be the topic, and as always, we invite all of you to, if you feel comfortable, right? Because I understand this is a very touchy subject, pun intended. And I know it can be difficult to share, but with anything that we talk about in these dream live streams, feel free to show up live and share with us in the comments on the replay beforehand. If you want to just share a dream, we are always open. We don't have to always talk about our experiences. It's easier for now. But we would love to hear from you. And so that is why I, did the poll on my story. And I think I'm going to do it more often because I got a lot of feedback from you all. And I really am so grateful. And thank you so much. So the first question that I asked on my story was, have you ever had sex in dreams? So 16 people out of 49 voted yes. Like they were all yeses, but I'm assuming that, the people that didn't vote either didn't want to share or the answer was no. So I'm going to say 16 people said yes out of 49. So that's about 33%. I definitely feel that it's more. It's probably like at least 50%. But thank you for those of you who shared that. So then I went on to ask, how did it feel? So 29% said it felt like physical sex. 50% said it was more so energetic. So it was like a feeling versus like the actual physical act of, or the feeling of physical sex. And then 21% said not sure, which
Mhm.
I'm going to put myself I'm kind of like not sure because I've had a little bit of both, right? And someone responded to me and said both, like in a message, and I was like, "Oh shoot, I should have put that one on there." So it was neither was the other option, which is like you didn't feel anything. No one voted neither, and one person voted both. So I
Yeah.
was like, that could have been an option too for both. And then I asked if or most people said that they climaxed during the dream sex. So that was interesting. As I mentioned, for me, I don't remember ever climaxing. Like I have like waking up, but not in the actual dream and being with the person. Someone commented that it felt as if it was all experienced from a primal climax. So something more deeper and probably more in that divine source type experience. And yeah, so that was the feedback that I got, and I'm actually quite impressed. I thought it was going to be mostly an energetic feeling when it comes to like the
I
sex.
find it interesting, but I'm not surprised with those results because I feel as though it is a normal thing as humans to seek out something that brings pleasure to us. Like it
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, really easy to fall into pleasure seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of I'm not surprised that it wasn't more so an energetic feeling over the physical. Like I do feel like if I'm thinking about
Mm-hmm.
society and where we are and how much work we need to do to kind of like individually,
Mm-hmm.
um, and understanding how much work goes into dealing with aspects of your life and how needed finding that pleasure can be, it doesn't surprise me. But I definitely fall in the realm of the both,
Yeah.
all and nothing.
Yeah. It's a little bit of everything. Yeah, so I think when it comes to really sitting with and, discerning what sex might mean for you in your dreams or sex in dreams in general, it really comes down to each individual dream with dreams, just in general, dream interpretation. And it comes down to like your own relationship with sex.
Yeah,
So that might, if you want to
absolutely.
reflect on, the dreams you've had regarding sex, what does that mean for you? And personally, like in this moment, I can honestly say, and it makes so much sense of where I am now with my sexuality and just like my choice to like abstain, is that I took it for granted in some sense. And I really like that they mention in the podcast that sex is a god in a sense. Like sex, it's like while we are very like weird about it culturally in society, it's just like a very touchy subject, which it should be because of all of the trauma around sex in general. But it's also that trauma, some elements of that is due to our taboo, like let's not talk about it, let's just put it over there
Yes.
and ignore it. Like a lot of that taboo also, or that trauma stems from that. So
Yeah,
it's like we want to have a reverence for it and hold it as something sacred. Like it doesn't have to be
absolutely.
shunned, but it also, we don't want to like just be like, oh, sex, 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 and like, just take it for
Yeah.
granted. And so
Well,
I'm definitely,
I think it's so important to have good communication
mm-hmm,
about your wants and your needs and your traumas and your triggers, things you like and things you don't like within your sex life. And I know that can be very awkward and it can feel uncomfortable. And, you might feel insecure about going about bringing these things up, but it is vitally important that there is communication because it really is so sacred. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, you should only have sex and it be like a very spiritual experience and it like take your time, like I think that's very important, but I also think that there's a lot of fun and pleasure in just getting pleasure from it as well. Like I'm not that person that's like you need to do it this way, but
yeah,
understanding your wants and needs and communicating those with your partners is so important. So I just
mm-hmm,
want to put that out there because despite the conversation being awkward and uncomfortable and sensitive, it's important to know what you want and what you don't want.
yeah,
I feel
and
like I need to
just
put that
yeah,
out as a PSA just because it is
yeah,
a touchy subject. I want to say nationally. I'm not going to say universally because I don't know culturally all of the different things that on in the world, but I do know in America in particular, we've had such a weird experience with like Christianity really being brought into like the light and how different types of people who are religious view sex and the act and how you shouldn't get any pleasure from it. It should just be for, procreation, and I know that tarnished the way that we've seen, and then with all the censoring and everything and just the extreme amount of SA,
mm-hmm,
it's it needs to be discussed. It needs to be
Yeah.
discussed. And I think that looking into your dreams around sex and those experiences in the unconscious can really help heal a wound in your conscious life.
Yeah. Yeah, this was some medicine. I mean, I hope that you all watching, Alexis, I hope that you definitely got some healing from this and just some
Oh,
insight.
for
I've
sure.
had a couple, like I'm getting goosebumps. I've had a couple profound aha moments just having this conversation. And yeah, I can't even put it into words, but this was such an amazing topic. We can go deeper with this. If there's something specific that you wanted us to talk about that we didn't get to tonight, definitely comment. Like, we want to have these conversations. We want it to be engaging for you all and be fascinating and interesting. And so please share with us any topics that you would like to hear us talk about in the nature of dreams. And we have a comment here from Jim. He said, I've been drinking every time Urania says sex. Just kidding. And a bunch of
How
emojis. That
funny
would be
would that
funny.
be? That would
Actually,
be
I
so
have, so I've
funny.
had my little buffer here, but nonetheless, yeah, that was a nice little distraction. I don't know where I'm going. Do you have any last words? I think you just said some last words, but anything else?
I'd like to say that yes, I feel as though this conversation was healing for me as well. Um, and that's what dream work really is about, is healing your internal wounds and growing as a person and reaching different levels of your spirituality, your mentality, your psychology, and how that reflects in your physiology, physicality, physicality, in the physical
Physicality,
sense.
physiology. Yep.
um, and you know I feel as though you can have a lot of fun with this topic, but it's also such a sensitive experience, like such a sensitive experience for every person, and has a different effect on each person. And I really do hope that it helps to heal, or at least help guide you to heal your own wounds around this topic, and it's definitely something we can go further into, part twos, part threes, and shared experiences, whether it be anonymous or not. I think it is an important topic to discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much I want to say, but what I'll say is my last words is that you are good. You're perfect wherever you are within the nature of this topic. And no one has it all figured out. We all have our theories, we all have our experiences, we all have our healing. And personally, I know that my journey and my approach to sexuality is just coming into deeper union with intimacy with myself as a divine being, as the universe. And I do feel when you can find that wholeness within yourself, like, and to come into that union with someone else, it's like, it's next level. That's kind of what I'm kind of taking away from this. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. So thank you everyone for watching. Of course, if
Thank
you
you.
like the video, please like our video. Please subscribe if you want to see more of this. We'll be here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. or sorry, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And definitely feel free to comment, share, check out the Dream Forum and all of the things. And we will talk to you all later. Bye. Sweet dreams.
Bye.